Hello, I'm Paul Laney, the retired sheriff from Cass County, North Dakota.
And I'm Lauren Matthews, and I'm the current social media and content specialist here at Turnkey.
And you are listening to JailTalk. And in part one of our series on mental health, we have with us Dr. Kimberly Miller, a nationally renowned police psychologist. And actually now you're starting to be internationally known.
Yes.
As she expand your horizon and expand your client base. You are also the president of the National Sheriff's Association Psychological Services Board. So
yes.
You are really starting to get involved. What I think is so neat about what you've done is your entire client base. I mean, you're a psychologist. You're an internationally known psychologist. You've dedicated your entire profession to law enforcement.
Yes.
And to helping us grow and helping us get stronger. So we are really excited to have you here for part two. In part one, we talked about a number of different things. We're going to talk about an overview. For those of you who have not listened to part one yet or seen part one yet, you certainly can see it. Lauren, how could they get to part one if they want it?
Yeah, so you can listen at jailtalk.podbean.com, or you can follow us on our YouTube channel if you would prefer to watch. So yeah, we would recommend checking out part one. There's a lot of great information, and a lot of it leads into this one as well.
Well, and speaking of that great information, maybe the best thing we could do is maybe just start with a quick overview, Dr. Miller. You talked about a lot of things in that first podcast, and I know I walked away from that even after all the years I served in law enforcement, even just myself now. I mean, I'm in a retired status. I'm doing an entirely different thing here now. But, you know, those years are always be in me, and those years are always something that they had their wear and tear on me. And you know, I don't think any of us ever come out of that profession the same as we walked in. I don't think it's possible. But I walked away from that, and over the days after that, I thought, there's a lot of things I could do to change even how I am now and how I think. And I made that promise about social media, and I'm taking that advice, and I'm starting to do things like that and not going to sleep at night as angry. So thank you for that. And I think our listeners and, you know, our hope with this all along was for our law enforcement leadership to be able to listen to this, whether you're listening on the podcast, you're watching the video on our studio cast, is to go back and have something to bring to their people. And there's no doubt after that first episode, they definitely have that ability. So I think if you could just give us a quick overview of what we talked about in part one, and we'll then feed right into part two, because today we got some really neat stuff.
Perfect. Yeah. So as y'all remember, as we talked about in the first episode, we really talked about building your bounce back, building up your ability to be more resilient, to be able to cope better, and really navigate both your personal and professional lives more effectively. So what we talked about was a few things. Number one, we talked about throughout the podcast, mindset. How mindset is critical, how you look at things, how you think about things, and importantly, what story are you telling about yourself, other people, and your world that you live in every day, because it is the stories that you tell that are connected to the emotions and then the behaviors that you choose. So the second topic, right in line with that, was emotions. We dove deep into what negative emotions are, the 4 reasons, the 4 things that lead us into a place of negative emotion, how to navigate through those emotions, and how navigating through those emotions lead us to not only learn how to de-escalate ourselves, but how do we de-escalate other people? How do we effectively model this behavior for other people? We also talked about setting boundaries, and setting boundaries isn't easy, but that's about setting boundaries in your personal and professional lives. It's learning when to say, no, I can't do that. No, I can't help with this other thing. It's also about setting boundaries in your own mind about what are you going to allow in and not allow in. We talked a lot about poop last time, and we're going to be talking about it more. But how do you not let the poop stick to you? How do you learn to let stuff go? How do you learn to not have things stick? And the last big category of stuff, Paul, you sort of mentioned it, was self-care in general. And how do we leverage the spaces that we need to rest, to reflect, and to respond, which means turning the social media off. It means turning the television off. It means getting picky about who you're spending time with. It's creating the space of silence where we can reflect, where we can renew, where we can fill our bucket up so that when we come to work, maybe not we're at 0, right, on a scale of 0 to 100, but maybe we're at 25. Because if we show up at 0 or 15 or 20 or 25, we're in a very different place than when we come to work with all the layers of poop on us for years and years, and we're at 75, we're looking for a fight. You can look at me crossways and I'm going to jump you. And that's how a lot of people end up coming into work. So it's really the framework of how do we identify our challenges in these areas of self-care and bounce back, and then how do we start creating the small moves every day. We're going to end with this, Lauren. The small moves every day to get us in a place where we're more resilient, when we're happier, and we're more fulfilled. So that's sort of a quick overview. And if you haven't watched it, go back and watch it. It is worth an hour plus of your time. Every moment is worth it, and it gives you so many tools to help you personally and professionally.
Yeah, definitely go back and watch it. There's so much information in that. And, after we were looking at your research, we came to the conclusion there's even more tools that you have brought to the table for people to increase their resiliency. And so the number one thing was vision. So our question was, how do you build that vision to just stay strong in your life, in your profession, in all of it?
Yeah, and Paul, you can relate to this with all the work we did on strategic planning, the importance of having a vision for your office.
Absolutely.
And a direction. But this is not about that, though it can be, and your vision of your agency should be very similar. But we're talking about a personal vision and how a personal vision can make you more resilient. Number one, creating your own personal vision gives you a destination that you are going to. It makes where you are now and where you have been less important than the future. Now, this could be about getting in shape. It could be about improving your relationship with your partner or with your children. It could be about going from a hobby that you have and making that a full-time career, especially those of you who are close to retirement and you're wondering what in the world are you going to do in retirement? Part of that vision might be setting a goal and saying, I'm really done this woodworking for quite a while. If I really spent some more time and got a few more tools, I might be able to sell some stuff. And then I love this. I get passionate about it. It excites me. And when I'm at my shop, all the cares of the world fall away. And I can just be there. So part of a vision is figuring out what is your purpose? Where do you have passion? Where is the energy that you want to put in your life? The second value of setting a vision is it illuminates a very clear path. And as you illuminate the clear path, everything else that doesn't fit on that path is very easy to let go of. And I'll speak for myself. I have things I still need to let go of that hold me back, that keep me from being my best. And when I get focused on that path, it is amazing to me with whatever I'm doing in my life, how all this other stuff that I used to give attention to or worry about, well, that's not on the path. I'm letting it go. I'm going to forgive if I need to. I'm going to drop a relationship if I need to. I'm going to quit doing a particular behavior. But when you get clear of your personal vision, and let's just pick getting fit, all that other crap goes away. And it's way easier to get clear about what's important. And then think about that every day. In addition to going to your job, you now have something else you care about every day that you're going to set aside time for, that you're going to do with intention. And as you make that progress on the vision, you're going to feel better and better every day. What I think challenges a lot of people is their life is just on repeat. They get up, they ate the same thing for breakfast, they go to work. They complain about the same things at work, they're not happy, they get home, they have the same food for dinner, they fight with their spouse, they yell at their kids, and they don't sleep good, and they get up again. We're just in this cycle.
They don't get over that last loss to Alabama.
Where's the penalty flag? I need one. I don't know. I don't have them, but I
Those
got
we
to.
Paul's
hid them
hiding
from
all
you,
of
I'm
them.
hiding them.
There. Poop.
Okay, I deserve that. I deserve that. I think your message to all of us is let go. Find that, set your visions for where you want to be. In the sometimes in the organizational world or the business world or the leadership world, you talk about gap analysis. I used to always do, when I first came into the sheriff's office, a gap analysis. Where are we at and where do we want to be? And so many times people think that about an organization, as a whole. We can really do a gap analysis of our own life every single day. Where am I at? Where do I want to be? When you said vision, that's what resonated with me right away, because I think any of us, and hearing you say that, I know that I could sit down and say, okay, where am I at in life? And where do I want to be? And what is the things that I need to get rid of to make me better, stronger, healthier? And what are the things that I need to do that are positive to get there? That's my gap analysis. And so that vision, I think, it does resonate. I think it'll resonate with everybody out in our audience, because I think any one of you watching right now, if you just sit down and think to yourself, what do I want to make better? What do I want to do? And follow her advice. I think we can make our lives cleaner. Because let's face it, we have so much clutter in law enforcement. We wake up every day. We don't know what's going to happen that day. We have no idea what's going to happen that day. And it weighs on us. And I think we need to get stronger and we need to do better. I look at myself in my career, and I look back at so many things I could have done different. And I had a very high-profile career. I had a very good career. I wouldn't trade 1 second and 1 minute, good and bad. But there's a lot of things I think I could have done different, and I think that should be a challenge that we put out here from JailTalk to all of our listeners, is do that. When you get off the show today, do that gap analysis of your personal life and ask where you want to be and how you want to be.
Yeah, I think it's important to set that. And again, a lot of people don't think about creating an individual strategic plan. And that's really what we're talking about, is filling in the gap, asking yourself, what do I want to improve in? What am I really sick of that I got to change? Or how can my life be more fulfilling? How could I enjoy my life day to day better if I got up and had something else, whatever the other thing is? And not to be morbid, but this really brings things into focus for me. If this was my last day on earth, my last week on earth, or even my last year on earth, what would I regret not having done? When you ask yourself that question, there is your path. There is your vision. And don't wait another day, because none of us is promised tomorrow.
Absolutely. I think, when I listen to that, and you put that into that personal realm, both, a lot of what I did when I decided to retire, and a lot of people were shocked I retired when I did, because I was kind of in the prime of my career. I was kind of at the prime, I was a national board member. I'd been very involved. I was asked to be involved in a lot of things, but I also in my life knew that now it's time. And I believe I had that vision at that time to say, this is what I want to do. A big part for me was where I wanted to move to and where I wanted to live the rest of my life. It was very different from my home in Fargo, North Dakota, and living on the prairie. I've moved to an entirely different part of the country, and my passion is snowmobiling, and I could drive right out of my front yard now into some of the most amazing trails and into the woods of God's creations, and I find that peace. But I said that the battle's never over, so that's my success on that end. The healthy end of it, I'll say one thing about wearing a gun belt, it kept you honest about your waistline. All of a sudden, that's my new mission, is like, okay, I got to maintain that healthy aspect of the living. I have my vision, but maybe when I get to the resort on the snowmobile, I don't have as many wings and maybe one less beer type of thing. So I think, I make a funny out of that, but I think the point that I've taken from you is that, even though you got to constantly be looking at your entire life and set your vision here, but make sure you're maintaining it in all aspects. And I think in law enforcement, and it's easy for me now to look back with 2020 vision, there's so much I could have done different to be better. I mean, I look back at my earlier days and my SWAT team days and all that, I was fit and I was strong. And you kind of, as you move up through the ranks, sometimes it's easier to get softer, but you still have to stay strong, both physically and mentally. And in the times that you're all facing now, even more so, that we need these tools that she's talking about. And when you're done with listening to this, go back to your agencies, go to your shifts, go to your night shift briefing and your next briefing, and talk about some of this and start opening up those doors to make your people strong. And that's our goal with this whole show, is to make life better for all of you.
Yes, indeed.
So let's talk a little bit about grit, because you talk about the vision and then you transition to grit. She gets a smirk on her face because she's already, we know where you're going with this, because, and you're going to put us on the spot a little bit as well with grit. But tell us a little bit about developing and fostering your grit.
So there's two main components of grit. And the first one we just sort of talked about with vision. The first component is purpose and passion. If you do not have a purpose and you do not have passion, you will be unable to have grit, because who cares, right? Think about right now a project or a circumstance or situation you were in you didn't care anything about. And how motivated were you to do that? Not. None of us are. If it is not purposeful and we are not passionate about it, we don't have energy. We don't want to do it. We put it on the back burner and we never get to it. So number one, to have grit in any situation, you've got to have purpose and passion. Number two, you have to have perseverance. And if you didn't watch the first one, you got to go back. Because I talked about how I transformed myself from a negative story to a positive story, and it changed my entire life. I'm not going to tell you the story now because you got to go watch the first episode. But you will hear in that story, if you haven't watched it already, how did I get to this new place? How did I get to the vision that I had? I told everybody I knew I was perseverant. I knew I would outwork anybody. I knew I could get there. I had no idea what the road looked like, but I knew I could do it if I was perseverant. And the only reason I could do all the work and be perseverant is because I had the passion, because this thing was the reason I was put on the planet. So if you're going to be more gritty, you have to have purpose. You have to have a reason that you're doing this thing. You have to have a passion for doing this thing. And then you have to outlast the hard times. Because let me tell you, on my journey, on Paul's and Lauren's, we've all had a hard journey. It has not been smooth sailing in our boats. But as we were on the journey, we focused on something bigger than ourselves. We focused on a higher cause. We reminded ourselves, why are we in the game? And I know you can relate with the whole DAPL thing. Why am I here? What am I doing? This is another month and yet another month and another month. Well, Paul had the passion and the purpose and focused on the higher cause and didn't get stuck in, this sucks today. This is hard today. You stayed focused on that because you remembered why you were in the game. You cared about being in the game. You focused on small moves, right? You didn't try to solve the DAPL situation in 10 minutes. It wouldn't have gotten solved even if you wanted it to be done. It was small moves. What are the small things you can do every day? What's a small thing you can take care of today? Because that's all you can do is live day to day. And most of us don't live like that. And then the final thing about any of this, and it ties right into vision, you cannot let your fear be louder. And what stops most of us in life is we fear something more than we want it. We have the negative story. It says, I can't do it, or that's too hard, or nobody who looks like me has ever achieved that, or my family doesn't believe in me, whatever it is. Or my boss doesn't believe in me. He gave me this project, or she gave me this project, and they don't actually think I'm going to be successful. I guess I won't be. Don't listen to that. You've got to let the fear go. You've got to step out in faith and be the best you can and not give up.
Well,
that's too much.
That's a lot to process
Okay.
there, but I think it's true. I think it's true. You talk about that grit, and you use an example of DAPL for us, for me as an individual leader, for all the leadership that was out there, and for our deputies and officers that were out there. I mean, we had officers from, at some point, 10 different states that came in to help us, and it was a challenge because you had one side you're trying to protect. One side that believes you're trying to protect the other side, the other side thinks you're protecting the other side. And, halfway through that time, a lot of times we had both sides upset with us, which I thought it's called balance. But it was really tough because you're there to, you're protecting First Amendment rights. At the same time, you're protecting people from the anger and the violence, and there was a lot of violence out there. And now we're seeing it all over the country. I'm having serious flashbacks when I watch what's happening to these officers out there, and I look what happened to our people out there, and what happened to all of us, and it's tough. And you're right. You can't get angry, you can't get mad. You have to be able to see that big picture. And we were out there to protect everyone, and that was a really tough position to be in. And I see it happening now all over the country again. So, for all those that are in and out there, maybe some great advice coming here from Dr. Miller as you look at your people and what they're having to deal with, and learn from all the things that happened in the past and make yourself better. So the grit it's a big word.
So outside of a crisis, because this is really important, I think we all can agree that in a crisis in our life, we can find the grit. Right? Because you have to. There is no option. So I don't care if it's a critical incident, for example, on the road or in the jail. Do y'all have grit? Do you persevere? Well, yeah.
You have to.
Right. So my question for y'all is, on a day-to-day basis, outside of a critical incident, outside of a personal crisis, how gritty are y'all on a scale of 0 to 100?
Wow.
Big scale.
Okay, 0 to 10 if that's easier. What do you think, Lauren?
Day to day, being honest, probably maybe a 5. I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I think there's always room for improvement. That's just my mentality. But the word grit for me kind of brings me back to my collegiate volleyball days. That's a word my coach would use all the time. And she would always tell us, grit, like GRIT, like greatness requires internal toughness. And so having that mentality of, obviously in crisis situations, but also just day to day, like, what are you doing to be better? What are you doing even just to get yourself through the day? Because we all have those days where we're just trying to get ourselves through the day. So having that grit. But like I said, I think there's always room for improvement. So.
Well, I don't know you that well yet, but I would bet you're at least a 7. I don't think you're a 5. You've been practicing it for a while.
Perhaps.
What do you think, Paul?
Oh, she's pretty gritty. She's, to see where she's at in age. And as we're coworkers here, so we see each other a lot. We've traveled together to different shows. And, she's our social media content specialist. So we talk to her all the time. And I don't think she gives herself enough credit. She's pretty gritty.
So what about you?
I think the grit that I was at 23 years old and the grit that I am now are probably very different. And probably more grizzled, now grizzled grit. But I would say this. I think the first test for me, you talk about your collegiate years from 18 to 22. When I was 17 years old, I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. And, just had this dream, this vision that I wanted to be a United States Marine. And I've never had a more trying time to get there. I mean, that was hard. That was tough. Boot camp is everything they say it is and more. And you question your own existence at some point.
Right.
And many times, what the heck am I doing here? But I think that's where I first learned it. I was a motocross racer and a professional snowmobile racer when I was younger. So I learned that kind of grit, that kind of competitive grit that you talk about. Went to the Marine Corps and I think that was probably the biggest turning point of my life. And I've said this a lot in my leadership presentations. I've done that. I think no Marine Corps for Paul, no Sheriff Laney, because I truly believe that. It was my first test of not only pushing yourself to a limit you never thought you could push yourself to being part of some of the most motivating and leadership training and challenging training that you could ever ask. Some of the people I admire most in my life, and you talked about mentors at one time when we were together yesterday, and I came from the Marine Corps, and they are just from whether it's I throw Sergeant Al Graybill or I throw Staff Sergeant Luis De La Rosa, those two men probably had more impact on my life as a young man than they ever know, and they both are a big reason I feel I succeeded in the world I was in. So I think it started then, the grit that I had to get through it. I know when I went in, I was a young, scared boy, and I came out a man who said, I can do whatever I want, and the only person that will ever hold me back is me. So I think my first initial was there, and when I walked down that, wearing those dress blues, and walked out to the door, hey, I'll take on the world, bring it. And I've never looked back. And I think that set the tone for me. Now, there have been highs and lows throughout life, absolutely, from, the death of a son to, 1 day old to, the things that happen in law enforcement you see every day that challenge you mentally. And, the physical end of it is certainly one thing, but you see a lot of death. You see a lot of horrible moments. You see a lot of violence. And it has that impact. I mean, you have to have that grit to see past it and get through it and still see the good. I've always prided myself on being the eternal optimist, and it wasn't always easy because you see a lot of not so optimistic things. And so I believe that grit, I think, got instilled in me young, and helped me get to where I'm at. But I don't think you can ever forget that. From going back to college when I was 35 years old, I had 2 little girls, and I was a PM and night shift lieutenant, and I'd be doing homework at 4:30 in the morning and trying to get things done, and it would have been so easy to say, I don't want to do this anymore. But I knew I had a bigger vision and a bigger picture. I wanted to run my own agency someday, and it certainly opened those doors. So when you say it, it certainly resonates, and I'll bet everybody out there listening right now is seeing their own vision and their own grit that they've had to develop over the years. And I think be proud of that. Be proud of what's made you strong. And if you don't feel that you're there, if you say, well, I'm a 3 or a 4, well, then find your way to get to 9 or 10. And I think you're gonna help them get there. So Yeah, that is a big word, and I think a big part of, I know, speaking personally, if we're going to be open and honest, you got to find that grit or you're not going to get there.
Absolutely. Not just professionally, but personally too. I think it's essential. And what Paul just said is you can't have just grit in one area. So one of the best things he did was work on his mindset and staying an optimist, even though he was immersed in tons of poop, like all of you are, literally and figuratively. When you work in a jail facility, you have to maintain this, and it takes grit to maintain a positive mindset. It's not easy, but you have to work on it every day.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, it's pretty easy to see that is a big part of your personality, Paul. And again, I don't know you very well either, but it's definitely part of yours as well.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah, Paul knows. But your next point is creating structure. And that sounds a little more like me, my personality. But can you explain the basics of that to our listeners?
Yeah, so structure, I think, is a huge part of being resilient. And a couple things come into focus for me. Number one is if you're going to create this personal vision and you're going to be gritty on the way to achieve your vision, you have to have some kind of a structure to get there. So it's not that you have to have every piece of the puzzle laid out or every step day to day where you're going, but what it does mean is you have to have a framework of the path. Right? It's like laying your own yellow brick road from the NA or anywhere in life. You have to know, do I at least know the next 5 feet? Can I see the next half mile? Do I know what I need to do today? What is a goal that I can achieve today? What's a small move I can do today? You're not trying to finish the race today, but it's setting that goal. The other piece around setting a goal and creating structure, and this is hard for everybody, especially in our social media world, is you're competing with yourself. You are not competing with somebody else. You are not competing with another team. You're not competing with another sheriff office or another former sheriff. I'm not competing with another psychologist. We need to focus on setting goals to run our race, to achieve our goal. And too many times we get on social media and we go, oh no, they're so much further ahead, and oh, they're so much more successful, and then I'm not there yet, and what's wrong with me? And then we burn negative energy, beating ourselves up and blowing up our structure, that if we would have just had our head down and focused on our race, we'd get there way faster. So that's the first part of structure, is you need to be able to set out goals, set out some kind of a timeline that you can improve your life, get a step further on your vision. But the second part of structure and how it relates to our bounceability, our ability to be resilient, is this. And people roll their eyes when I say it, so y'all might be doing it too, and it's fine. But do you have a personal crisis plan? Most people don't. They certainly have an organizational crisis plan, because I know if something horrible happened here at Turnkey Corrections, y'all have a backup plan. Y'all have an organizational disaster plan. All law enforcement have a disaster plan. But what's your own personal disaster plan? And what I mean by that is, what's your story you're going to tell when crisis comes? We talked last time about crush events, right? And how devastating those events can be. When a crush event comes, do you have a structure that can hold you up? Do you already have a positive default story? Have you already practiced your mindset? Do you have coping resources? Do you have relationships where you can call somebody on the phone and say, I am falling apart. This thing just happened. I don't know what to do. Have you already tapped into peer support? Do you already have a therapist? Do you have a chaplain you trust? Like, what is your structure? If we wait to the day of a crisis to figure out our structure, we're not going to know what to do. We're not going to have somebody that we can call. We're not going to already know the people on peer support. And we're going to go, oh, I can't call them. I don't know them. Because we haven't built the relationships that then we can leverage. The other part of that, and having your own crisis plan, is get yourself right in today. We talked a little bit about that last time, and mindfulness and taking deep breaths to get us present. But when you get in a crisis, can you de-escalate yourself out of the emotions and say, what is important right now? Let me not worry and stress about this huge event that happened. Let me just say, what is important right now? How can I remind myself to get into right now instead of spiraling into stress and negative emotion? Additionally, when you're navigating a crisis, do you have backup plans? Most of us don't. Most of us feel like we're on a roller coaster, we're hanging on for dear life, and we don't have a plan A and B and C because we haven't had time to figure it out. But if you create this crisis plan up front and create the structure up front, okay, if I call the chaplain and they don't answer, what do? I'll call peer support. What if I call everybody on peer support and everybody else is in crisis or unavailable? Then what do? Well, then I call my best friend. Okay, what if my best friend doesn't answer the phone? Then what do? Because what if it happens in your agency and everyone's in crisis? Do you have that fifth person on the list that you've already developed a relationship with that you can call? We don't think about that. And as silly as it sounds, create a crisis plan and write it down. And tell the people you put on that list, you are in my personal crisis plan. So when I call you at 2 a.m. and you don't pick up right away and I call back, please answer. Because the only reason I would call you at 2 a.m., because I don't work midnights, is because I'm in a crisis. Then your people are prepared to know their role in the plan and be available in the plan. So I know that's probably a little overwhelming, and most people don't think about creating a crisis plan. But if you get used to creating structure in your day-to-day life about setting your vision or how you want to improve, it's easier to think about setting the vision and doing the structure around a personal crisis plan that you practice.
You know, when you talk about structure, I'm an old tactical team guy, an old SWAT team guy, and I think about, we used to always talk about, you know, no raid plans survives past point of entry.
Right.
You know, and so you had to have that structure. You had to have that foundation behind you that you could flow off everything from there. Because it's one of those things I always talk about, having the game plan, or if you go in with no game plan, no nothing, you have nothing to respond to, or you have no foundation to respond to. If you go into a tactical raid and you just run to the door and go in, none of you know what you're going to do. You're going to do something really silly. So, you know, looking at that, having that structure, having that foundation, because that's, once you have that, you can adapt to anything. And I think that then leads us to a lot where you talk about living in the now. Mm-hmm. You know, that I looked at that is that so many law enforcement agencies have to live in the now, because, you know, you build your structure, you build your readiness, you build your team, you build your foundation, but nothing's ever the same in our world. Nothing. Every day you go in, you don't know what's going to happen that day. And you need to respond to that and live in the now. So talk a little bit about living in the now, because I think that's a critical part.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you framed the tactical piece of that, because I think where law enforcement does really great living in the now is always around crisis. Y'all are good at crisis. You are good at being present in crisis, and you are very good at navigating through crisis and just focusing on, like I said, what is important now.
Right.
Y'all are good at that. Now, outside of a crisis, bless your hearts, y'all are not good at that. And most of us aren't as humans, so I'm not just picking on Paul. We're all not good at it. So here's what I mean by that. Most of us don't live in the now. So even as y'all are listening or watching this podcast, you are probably not right here. Some of you are thinking about dinner. Some of you are thinking about a supervisee that might need this information. Some of you are thinking about what happened last month and you wish you would have had a crisis plan and you didn't, so you're beating yourself up for not having thought of that idea. Most of our now moments, outside of the crisis, which makes us hyper-focused on the moment, most of us don't live in the now. We're either living in the past or we're living in the future. Most of our now moments, we burn so much negative energy living any other place than where we are right now. We all do it. We're in your now moment and you're thinking about what happened with your dog this morning. You're at your now moment and you're thinking about the fight with your spouse last night. You're in your now moment thinking about a grudge that you hold over that coworker that continues to walk by your office that you wish would just go away and quit. And it keeps stirring it up. So you're not really doing email. You're thinking about that coworker. You're on the fight you had 2 years ago that they can't get beyond. And then if you're not doing that, the other thing we're doing is, oh, man, I can't wait till Friday. Or whenever your day off is. So many of us in our nows, we're thinking about the days we have off. We're in our nows thinking about the vacation we're going to take in 2 months. And for the next 2 months, we're not in the now. We're at vacation. And we're resenting the fact we have to come to work and still do stuff. And the other way I see people do this and waste their lives is they wait to be happy. Well, Paul, I'll be happy when I retire. Well, I'll be happy when I finally get that divorce. I'll be finally happy when my kids get out of college and I don't have to pay that tuition anymore. I'll finally be happy when I get that promotion. I'll finally be happy when my boss quits. We spend our whole life waiting to be happy and waiting to be fulfilled. And here's the reality. The only time we can be happy is right now. That's it. Sitting here doing this podcast. Are you happy?
I'm very happy right now. Yeah.
Are you happy?
Absolutely.
Hallelujah. I'm happy too. But that's the work, right? Because we can't do this podcast well if we're all at 5 o'clock at dinner.
Right.
We'll eventually get to 5. We'll eventually go to dinner. But if we're going to do this good for the people we're trying to serve, we have to be right here. We cannot be anywhere else.
Right.
But too much in life, we live in the past or we live in the future, and we're not maximizing our nows. Now, some of you are probably thinking, now, wait a minute. Didn't you just say about having a vision and thinking about the future, and now you're telling me I'm not supposed to? No. There's nothing wrong with using your now moments to make a vision and work toward a future goal. That's leveraging your now to get you there. Where it's dysfunctional is if you're in the now and you're on vacation for 2 months before you go on vacation. And then when you get on vacation, you dread going back to work in 2 weeks, and you waste your entire vacation dreading work. So that's what I mean by that. Does that make sense the way I'm explaining?
Yes,
Okay.
it does.
So how often do y'all feel like y'all live in the now?
I think I relate, where I'm at. I think a lot of the times I do try to live in the now. And I think as you get older, you start having the kind of those realizations that, wow, I'm not 23 anymore. I'm not 33 anymore. I'm not 43 anymore. I'm 53, soon to be 54. And I think you start thinking about that. And I think your advice, it really resonates that you should live in the now and look for the good in things and try to make quality. You're right. You said it in the last episode that you're not promised tomorrow. None of us are promised tomorrow. And, it was a big reason why I retired when I did. I wanted to go live a life that was very different. At that point, turnkey wasn't on my horizon. I didn't know I was going to still get to work with my brothers and sisters in law enforcement. It's been wonderful, and a door opened that I never knew was going to open. Now I got the best of both worlds because I got to move where I want to move to, and I got to work for this amazing company. So things for me, I think appreciate that a lot more and in the now, and I try to find the good out of the bad better than I did before. But like you said, maybe I'm at a 6 there and I need to be at an 8 or a 9. And that's my drive coming off this show, listening to you, is I'm going to go find that. I'm going to try to do better at that. And I can't speak for Lauren. We come from very different perspectives.
Yeah. I think for me, I don't have those SWAT stories to kind of relate them back to. But for me, what I'm taking from a lot of it is that a lot of these tools you're giving they go beyond just your profession. I mean, in your everyday life. And so for me, a story that stuck out to me is, my sister got married 2 weeks ago, and anybody who's planning a wedding right now in the midst of COVID knows how stressful that is. And we changed the date probably 4 times.
Wow.
And that's, anybody who's planned a wedding knows it's stressful. But looking back on it, finding kind of the silver lining and the perspective of, my sister said, well, I didn't have all 300 guests there, but I had the 60 family and friends that, like you said, who would you call? Those are the people she would call. And, looking back, she's like, I got to talk to every single one of them. That doesn't happen at a lot of weddings. For me, looking back over the course of the last few months, I've got to spend so much time with my family. We had the wedding in my parents' backyard. It was just, looking back, finding that silver lining and then, reflecting, was I really in those moments, or were we stressing about the wedding day? Was it going to rain? Whatever. So I think for me, realizing these tools you're presenting to us go way beyond our professions. We can utilize them in our everyday lives outside, of the workplace, take them home, take them to your relationships and everything in between.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think one thing that Lauren said really resonated with me is that if we don't take them in our personal lives, we can't bring them to our professions. That it has to be a full circle thing. We can't live 2 lives. And you really have to be content in each one is what I take from, that was a good point.
Well, and I appreciate what you said. Because people ask me, okay, well, how do I be more present, right? And in the other episode, we practice taking a really deep breath. And sometimes it's as simple as that. Can you just take a deep breath and say, where am I right now? What can I do right now? But a few other things you said are my other recommendations about how do you get in the now. Practice gratitude. Be appreciative of what you have right now. It might not be the perfect wedding, and y'all could have burned negative energy saying, "Oh, it should have been like this. I can't. What would it be like if we waited till COVID was over?" And no, but you said, let's just be grateful for what we have now. Let's find a silver lining. Let's find something we can appreciate in this moment. And if you can do that, you're 100% in the now. So the idea about being more present is, what can you focus on right now? Back to what's important now. What can you appreciate right now? What can you be grateful for right now? And how can you, if you're in a problem space, instead of dreading the future or wishing you're in the future, get out of focusing on the problem and get on focusing on the solution. Because when we get in the solution mindset, we're fully immersed in this, versus if we're in a problem mindset, we're fighting against it. We're wishing it wasn't happening. We're saying that's not fair. And so a lot of being present in the now and leveraging our power is getting into a solution instead of complaining that the problem showed up. So have I totally overwhelmed y'all with a ton of tools?
No, I think they're great.
Well, you certainly really have us thinking. There's no doubt about that, for sure.
I mean, I was thinking, kind of had me wondering then how being present in the now can affect your perspective.
Yeah, well, that's an amazing insight that you're having. You know, being more in the now is really where your power exists. And we sort of talked about that, right? Being more in the now enables you to focus on where you are right this second and what you can do instead of worrying about the past or the future. So if we want to have a better mindset, right? If we want to be more resilient, a piece of, and I guess a gift of focusing on the now is it helps you with your perspective. When you're in the now, you can't worry about what happened in the past and you can't dread what's coming in the future. All you can do is leverage where you are. So oftentimes when problems come or challenges come, we say, well, this isn't fair and this happened to me. This person did this to me. My boss did it to me. The virus did it to me, right? And I honestly, that was one of my struggles because I travel 98% of the time in my work. I do some things from home, but most of mine is face-to-face training, and that came to a screeching halt in March. So my whole business dried up. I had no income, and I had to apply for unemployment. Now, at the time of all of this and figuring out how am I going to pay my rent and my bills and make it through this, I had no clue. I had zero idea. And when I first started that, though I think I'm pretty resilient, I got in this little victim mindset. And I was like, this is happening to me. What's wrong? This isn't fair. It's not right. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was really stressed. And then I started reflecting and thinking and getting back in my power of the now. Well, what can I do right now? I can't change the virus. I can't hurry and get to the end of it. What can I do right now? So I ended up saying, well, what have I talked about for literally years? Getting my stuff online. I've talked about it because so many of my clients have asked, can you get your stuff online? We don't want to just see you here because not all of the whole agency can't come. We want to have your stuff for everybody. And I've promised people for years, I'm going to get my stuff online. But I was so blessed to be busy and travel 225 days a year. There was no time to get my stuff online. Well, look at the hidden gift.
It is now.
Absolutely. And it pushed me to create my first online course. It pushed me out of my comfort zone. It made me hire a coach. And so though I was in the very beginning of it in that negative mindset and it's happening to me, this is not fair, I was able to move and say, wait, but how is all this COVID stuff happening for me? How is this actually a gift? And I found that in being able to launch my first class, which has been hugely successful, and get direction and support. And so what I challenge people on is reframe the challenge. Find out how bad things, unfair things, not right things are happening for you and not to you. Because I firmly believe that every single challenge in our life is only there to make us better. And I believe that there is always a gift in a challenge. There's always a lesson in a challenge. And my mentor that I look up to that really inspires me to keep doing this work is Viktor Frankl, who was a concentration camp survivor. And he found a way, believe it or not, to become a better human in a concentration camp, to be of service to others in a concentration camp, to build resilience in a concentration camp.
Wow.
And if he can find a gift and a lesson in how being put in a concentration camp happened for him, we all have it easier because none of us will be in that circumstance. Right. But that gets at not only having a better vision for yourself, but living in the now, focusing on what you can control, and reframing every challenge into an opportunity. So I don't know if either of you, can relate to that or have found ways to reframe a challenge you were in, but it might be helpful to share something that can connect with people who are listening.
Well, I certainly have one that resonates, and it's very deeply personal. But in my first marriage, my wife and I lost a child. And everything was fine. Everything was healthy. We were excited. We're going to be new parents. It's our first child, and we had a little boy born, Brandon Paul. And a lot of things happened medically right at the end that caused a lot of distress and a lot of crisis. And he didn't survive, and it gutted me. You're this proud person. I'm at the prime of my career, and at Fargo PD at the time. Just everything was going right, and it just destroyed us. And it was hard to even wake up the next day because you're thinking, why us, God? Everybody says, well, only 1% of children don't make it. Well, when you're the 100%, you don't really buy that. And I think we both felt that way at the time, and it was really hard. And I knew I had to it was hard. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I barely remember that day of the funeral. It just was devastating. And then to try to go back out, a few weeks later, and I had a great support team. I had a sergeant that really looked out for me. I had that support base. They made me take time off. They made me get my head right. And then I came back, and it was just kind of like you have to question your purpose, and you have to question, that okay, well, life didn't go. I expected to have a 2-month-old now, and we have nothing. And we had to think about that, and it really affected my wife at the time very, very, very hard. And it was really, to this day, I look back, one of those traumatic changing moments in your life where it could have sent me a couple different directions down the road. And in some ways I used it as a drive, and in some ways I used it as a catalyst. And so, we're making a promise that we're gonna share things and make better. That was deeply personal to me, and kind of even hard to share it in a situation like this on the air. But it was something that impacted me. But when you look at the career that I went on to have and the personal life I went on to have, I'm very content, but I'll never forget that day. And his birthday's coming up in a week. And, it's always a hard day, but you gotta, you can't let it destroy you. You've got to be able to look in the mirror and say, okay, the good Lord gives you one life to live. Don't squander it, and go out and do the best. And that was hard for me to come back. I'm not gonna lie. That was a hard time, but I was able to do it.
But it sounds like you were able to use that and frame it as a chance to work on your resilience and get better and survive through that. And,
absolutely.
And not have the rest of your life be determined by that crush event.
Absolutely. And I look back, and that crush event could have done it. But I goes back to, I think, that resiliency I learned as a Marine, and that resiliency I learned in other aspects of my life where I thought, I can't let this beat me. I can't let this, and then it's destroyed 2 lives. So it's even just talking about it right now, you look back at those times, you just think, oh my gosh, how hard that was. But you also realize, years down the road, you're going to be okay. And you have to find that light. You have to find that. And that's what's happening in law enforcement right now. I mean, it's dark times, man. Everywhere we turn around, we're under attack. All of a sudden, the incidents that have happened are making an attack on a profession where hundreds of thousands of good deeds are done every single day. That officers suit up and keep law and order and keep people safe and put their own life on the line every single day. And there's a narrative out there right now that all cops are bad, that everybody and it's a dark time, but we have to find that light. We have to maintain our honor. We can't go down into the dirt. We have to maintain that resilience. We have to maintain that integrity, and we will, because that is how we're built, and that is how law enforcement is built. But it's going to be a rough road getting there. There's no doubt about it. And it's, I think, incumbent upon our law enforcement leaders to look into their own departments and how are you going to find that resilience? How are you going to build it? And you're helping them right here today, helping do that.
Well, and I would say also, even in this circumstance that we're in, even though the challenge we're in, find a way to use this challenge that y'all are facing to make you better. Like maybe you don't have some major black eye issue in your department, but don't say, I don't have any work to do. It's okay, how can we get even better? What's one thing we need to change in our culture? What's one thing we need to change about how we treat each other inside the building?
Absolutely.
Maybe we need to be more engaged with our community. Like, don't get angry because of the challenge because you're going to sit and spin and go into negativity. Say, okay, this is not fair. It's not right. Okay, but how can we use it to our advantage? How can we build more relationships? How can we be more proactive? Whatever it is, don't get mad that the challenge shows up. Find a way to make it make you better.
So when you're just saying what you just said, you talk about being strong in mind and we looking forward and all that. But what about being strong in body? Because we used to have a saying in the Marine Corps, strong in body, strong in mind. How does that play into what you teach?
Yeah, so I think they're both important. And I think what happens to a lot of us, especially as we age, and I'll lean this way because you're young and youthful and beautiful and in shape. As we get older, we tend to take more initiative with our mind, with our cognitive work, and we forget our physical bodies and we neglect ourselves and we don't always eat healthy and all that. And if you really want to be armored up and in survival mode and also in thriving mode in life, I think we have to take care of both. I think you can't have a good mind and have a negative body experience with yourself. So I think that comes with the food that you eat, making sure that you're eating nutrient-dense food, making sure that you're cooking ahead of time. And I'll tell you the one other gift, other than getting my classes online, that I've experienced, if I've actually lost 20 pounds. I still don't eat perfect when I travel, but I've lost 20 pounds, and here's how I lost it. I didn't have to eat crap food anymore in the airports and eat drive-through and fast food. I have been able, since second week of March up until now, it's almost September, I have been able to plan my meals. I've been able to cook healthy food. I've been able to control all the food I need to eat instead of being at the whims of travel and stuff. And because of that, I've been able to lose 20 pounds. My challenge is getting back to the gym and now making my muscles regrow that I have neglected forever. So that's my next step of being fit in my body. The other thing I've also been able to do that I think law enforcement struggles with a lot, and I can't wait to hear y'all's view on this, is sleep. Because I have not had to travel in multiple time zones and get up 4, 3 in the morning, depending on where I'm sleeping. And then I'm exhausted. And then I have to go to bed. Then I have to get on another plane and fly. Like, I've been able to get solid sleep, which has also helped my mental health. So to me, it's mind, it's spirit, it's body, it's everything. So I don't know where y'all are on your own journey of fitness, but from my perspective, it's essential.
I've shared a little bit about the journey and then, the gun belt keeping you honest and all that. And I think that's just something I could take. I always slept well when I was a law enforcement officer, sheriff. I tried to leave. I always had a thing where at the end of every day, both when I was a young officer and to my last day as sheriff, is I would look in the mirror and say, did you do it right today? Mm-hmm. And I would be my challenge to myself every day to make sure. And if I, knew that I did, no matter how hard it was, whether it was just a call I was on when I was a young guy or when I was a sheriff, maybe I had to do something really hardcore like let somebody go or terminate somebody's employment, which is never easy. And if anybody says they enjoy that, then there's something wrong, because anytime you're making a change like that, you're affecting somebody's life. But it was always at the end of the day, I would ask myself and look in the mirror and say, did you do it right today, Paul? And if I could answer yes, I slept very well. Now I'm in my new life. I'm here at Turnkey Corrections. I travel, outside of COVID, which has obviously changed all of our lives. But last year, my first year, new career, new life, new place where I live, everything. I was on the road almost every day of the week. I was home, I think, 3 weeks out of the last year where I was actually home. Working from my home, and I was there. I mean, I'd leave from there and come back to there, but usually leave Monday, come back Friday, because my job's to get out and talk to fellow sheriffs. And, I always joke and talk about how I speak sheriff or speak a jail administrator. Well, you got to be there to do that. And so my whole life was on the road. It's vendor shows, working with clients, and, later nights as you're out entertaining clients, that type of thing. And trying to find that new norm. I'm excited about this because you never quit learning. And maybe in my law enforcement world I had that, but now I am finding that it's harder to eat right. You're stopping at gas stations all along the way as you're on your way to a demo, shoving something in that shouldn't be going into your body in the first place, but you got to do it. And so I think I'm going to take out of this today, and I hope our listeners will take something out of it, is I'm going to take that as a personal challenge from you, that I'm going to, I'm going to put down that social media like I started after the first time. I did that, and I'm going to keep doing that. And two, I'm going to try to eat right and work out more, because I'm not 23. I'm not the athlete I was back at that time. I got to fight for it more, but I think I'm going to come out of this show with that mindset and say, okay, starting right after this, I'm going to do that again. I'm going to eat right, and I'm going to get back into that physical fitness game a bit.
Yep. I think it's critical. Lauren, from your seat, from your life, where does taking care of your body fit in with this whole thing about self-care and resilience?
I think for me, I feel like I'm getting to almost the point you're at, because, I went from working out for 3 hours a day to having my meals almost planned for me. Like they say, you need this much protein, this much whatever. It was so easy because it was just my life. It was a habit. It wasn't until after it was done that I realized, the benefits of it, not just physically, but my mental health. Like I was working out every single day. And if you don't work out every day, you don't know the serious mental benefits that come from that. And so for me, it was taking a step back in the last year and kind of giving myself that grace of, you're in a transition. You don't have the time to work out for 3 hours a day, nor do I necessarily need to. Maybe that's not healthy. So for me, it was finding even the kind of like that gap that you said, but giving myself that grace to figure out my new plan. And that's going to be different. And so I think, whether you're, retiring from law enforcement or whatever it is, give yourself that grace to find your new plan, to find your, whether it is health or, mental health, whatever it is, give yourself that time to figure it out. But then having that balance of, don't give yourself the grace, well, I worked hard for the last 4 years of college. That means I get to eat all the Oreos. Well, no, that's not good for you. Wrong kind of grace. So I think it's finding that balance.
I think it's one thing for me, and I hope for young people, and when we all in the law enforcement world, granted, and I'm retired now, but it's your family for life, and you look at it, is that when you look at the majority of our line level, entry level, deputies, the field deputies, corrections officers, they're Lauren's age. They're that, 23 to 28, they're that backbone of the organization. They're out on the field every day. They're in the pods at the jail every day. They're the ones that do that. And I hope, and I think it's our responsibility as law enforcement leaders to help them get there, is that they embrace what you just said and embrace, the methods that you talked about getting there and what you talked about, Lauren, because I think we have a responsibility for our people and to our team to help them see that. And that's where I hope the young people, that's another way we can help as leaders, is make sure right from the entry level people that we are embracing those philosophies and we're teaching those philosophies and we're making this, what we're talking about here, part of our daily environment in the work culture, because law enforcement is such an intense job and the things they see and the things they do. But if we could capture some of this, if all of you out there will embrace what Dr. Miller has said and make that part of your strategy every day, is the mental health of your people, you're going to be a better organization, you're going to be stronger, and you're going to have that structure and that resilience. And I just, that's why I think it's so great we're able to bring this and hopefully help that way, because I think that resonates a lot. You and your generation are the line level people out there, and you're the future of law enforcement. You are the next sergeants, the next lieutenants, the next captains, the next chief deputies and deputy chiefs, and the next sheriffs and chiefs. And we have a responsibility to get you there and teach what we know, but also learn from our youth as well, because I do think the youth have it a little bit better figured out with balance than a lot of us older people do. And that's a whole topic for a whole nother show, but in a lot of ways that they do. So we're coming to the end of part 2. We're coming to the end of this part of the podcast with mental health, and we're really excited because we have a number of shows we're going to do with you over the year. And as we close out our first one here, I know you have some things you want to talk about, and you have an immediate allergy that relates to an ARC. And so why don't you bring us to closure here?
Yeah, so what I'll say is if you haven't watched the first one, this is your last reminder. You need to go watch it. But remember what we said before in terms of vision and getting to a better space. It's all about the structure around the small moves. You're not trying to run a marathon the first day you put on your brand new sneakers and you haven't run in 5 years. You're not doing that. You're trying to find what's the small thing I can do. Maybe you only run 20 minutes your first day. Maybe you walk. Maybe you don't even run your first day. But what is the small thing you can do? And my recommendation is to remember the goal of 10 minutes. So that's 1% of a 16-hour day, right? It's technically 9.6, but you round up. So the goal of this is just find one thing to do for 10 minutes a day. One small thing. Whether that's your mindset, tell a better story, it's writing down your vision, it's creating that crisis plan, it's working on your grit and making sure that you have both passion and perseverance. You're only competing with yourself. Whatever that is, you're finding ways to ground yourself in the now by doing deep breaths, by focusing on what you control, by getting into the solution, by looking for things strategically that you're happy for or you're grateful about or whatever it is. If you do that with intention for 10 minutes a day, in a month, you're going to be 30% better at whatever the resilient strategy you picked. And in 2 months, you're going to be 60% better. But by January 1st of 2021, you will be 126% better than wherever you started today. And that's the gift of this. And this is how you fit resiliency into your day-to-day life when you already have full-time jobs and you already have full-time private lives. Well, how do you do it? You spend 10 minutes a day and you don't give up. You practice with intensity and with perseverance. Now, what people ask me all the time is, well, this is all great and this sounds wonderful and I'm sure I'll use all of this in a crisis, but I'm not in a crisis right now. Well, when did Noah build the ark?
Before the rain.
Before the rain, which also means before the flood, which means before the hurricane, which means before the snowstorm. You cannot pull from habits you have not intentionally developed. It's the same thing with SWAT and firearms and defensive tactics. You don't practice one day and you're done. You practice all the time. Why? Yeah. Because you never know when the fight will happen. You never know when you have to make the shot. You never know. Well, law enforcement is fantastic at that. What y'all aren't good at is this. Because people go, oh, I am resilient. I can handle it. And then you get in a crisis and you're falling apart. And you never thought about all these things. So we have to arm law enforcement with resilience. We have to arm civilians with resilience. We have to arm psychologists with resilience. Because just like us, if we don't practice every day, it doesn't matter if we teach it, if we don't live it when our own crisis happens, we're not going to be resilient. So remember the metaphor of building your ark. All of these tools we talked about in this episode and in the previous episode is all about you building this ark that will weather any storm. But if you don't put it together with intention, if you don't maintain your ark and replace a board that's rotting, you're going to end up on a rickety dinghy in the middle of a storm without a jacket. And no one is going to want to be on your boat. But if you build your ark with intention, you can bring people on your ship. You can help them learn how to navigate the storm. And you can live the example and have the confidence that you can get through absolutely anything. And this is what my work's about. This is what this podcast has been about, is arming and equipping you to sail through any storm and survive and thrive, both.
Yeah, that's great. I love that metaphor. I think we'll definitely use that around here.
Absolutely.
So if people want to learn more from you, if they want to dive deeper into any of these topics, can you share with our listeners where they can find you, where they can contact you?
Yes. So you can go to my website, which is KimberlyMillerConsulting.com. You can learn all about me there and see my classes I do and learn about a little bit more about who I am and consultation I offer and all of that. And if you want, follow me also on LinkedIn and Facebook. And I know they're going to put those up, but you can search for Dr. Kimberly Miller and you should be able to find me well on Facebook and LinkedIn. If you can't, shoot me an email. I can send you the pages, but I'd love y'all to follow me. I'd love y'all to reach out to me and let me know how I can help you on your journey of personal and professional success.
Yeah, that'd be
Excellent.
great.
Excellent.
And like Dr. Miller said, go back and watch our first episode with her. She shared some great information in that. So if you want to watch the first one, you can go to our YouTube channel or listen on our podcast websites. Otherwise, follow us on our Twitter, our JailTalk Twitter for updates. And we're always open to questions or comments. So you can email us at jailtalk@turnkeycorrections.com. And I think we're about ready to close out this podcast.
I think we are. Well, Dr. Miller, on behalf of Lauren and I, we can't thank you enough for kicking off our first show. You know, as I said in the earlier episode, we made a promise to our listeners that we're going to walk the walk we talk, that we're going to bring in quality shows, we're going to bring in quality people and their backgrounds in an effort to help the law enforcement world get better, and anything that we can do. You know, we're a law enforcement technology company, we're a corrections technology company, and our goal is to not only just our clients, but whether it's future clients, whether it's just nobody that has anything to do with what we do, if we can give back to the profession that supports us, and we support that. You know, a lot of us come from the industry, and it makes me feel good to know I can look into that camera and know I'm doing my best to support my brothers and sisters. Stand strong. We're going to get through this. It's a rough time, but we're going to look back on it, keep our pride, keep our honor, keep our professionalism, and we're going to get there. And when we can take ideas like what you've given us to make our organizations better, we're going to get there, because you're going to help get us there, and you're going to give us the tools to do that. So we can't thank you enough for helping us walk the walk we talk and keeping the promise we made. And at least I did you a favor this time. I brought you in August, not in January.
Indeed. Indeed, you did.
You enjoyed this a little atmosphere, I think, a little bit better, because I never heard the end of it when it was like, 10 below.
I was more like 20, but
Okay,
we
Okay. You know, after zero, you just get
Who's
used
counting?
to it. Yeah, it's the upper Midwest. But on behalf of all of us, I want to say thank you. You have been listening to Jail Talk. Next month, we are going to have a really exciting second episode, and then in future episodes, we've got Dr. Miller coming back a number of times. So thank you for tuning in. You've been listening to Jail Talk. I'm Paul Laney.
And I'm Lauren Matthews.
Have a great week.